What drives a man to transcend his own suffering and personal ambitions in the quest for a greater mission? In this episode, we explore Swami Vivekananda's profound spiritual struggles and the vision that began to crystallize, guiding him towards a monumental journey of transformation for both himself and India. Welcome back to our series on the life of Swami Vivekananda. In this episode, we delve into Narendra's intense spiritual and emotional trials, including his struggle with illness, his interactions with revered saints, and his growing realization of his broader mission. Witness his evolution from a seeker of personal enlightenment to a visionary determined to uplift his nation and address the global human condition. Narendra, at the time of his meeting Pavari Baba, was suffering from the severe pain of lumbago, and this had made it almost impossible for him either to move about or to sit in meditation. Further, he was mentally distressed, for he had heard of the illness of Abhidananda, another of his brother disciples who was living at Rishikesh. "You know not, sir," he wrote to a friend, "that I am a very soft-natured man in spite of the stern Vedantic views I hold, and this proves to be my undoing. For however I may try to think only of my own good, I begin, in spite of myself, to think of other people's interests." Narendra wished to forget the world and his own body through the practice of yoga and went for instruction to Pavari Baba, intending to make the saint his guru. But the Baba, with characteristic humility, put him off from day to day. One night, when Narain was lying in bed thinking of Pavari Baba, Sri Ramakrishna appeared to him and stood silently near the door, looking intently into his eyes. The vision was repeated for 21 days. Narendra understood. He reproached himself bitterly for his lack of complete faith in Sri Ramakrishna. Now at last he was convinced. He wrote to a friend, "Ramakrishna has no peer. Nowhere else in the world exists such unprecedented perfection, such wonderful kindness to all, such intense sympathy for men in bondage." Tearfully he recalled how Sri Ramakrishna had never left unfulfilled a single prayer of his, how he had forgiven his offences by the million and removed his afflictions. But as long as Narain lived, he cherished sincere affection and reverence for Pavari Baba, and he remembered particularly two of his instructions. One of these was, "Live in the house of your teacher like a cow," which emphasizes the spirit of service and humility in the relationship between the teacher and the disciple. The second instruction of the Baba was, "Regard spiritual discipline in the same way as you regard the goal," which means that an aspirant should not differentiate between cause and effect. Narendranath again breathed peace and plunged into meditation. After a few days he went to Varanasi, where he learnt of the serious illness of Balaram Bose, one of the foremost lay disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. At Ghazipur, he had heard that Surendranath Mitra, another lay disciple of the Master, was dying. He was overwhelmed with grief, and to Pramadadas, who expressed his surprise at the sight of a sannyasin indulging in a human emotion, he said, "Please do not talk that way. We are not dry monks. Do you think that because a man has renounced the world he is devoid of all feeling?" He came to Kolkata to be at the bedside of Balaram, who passed away on May 13th. Surendra Mitra died on May 25. But Narain steadied his nerves, and in addition to the practice of his own prayer and meditation, devoted himself again to the guidance of his brother disciples. Sometime during this period, he conceived the idea of building a permanent temple to preserve the relics of Sri Ramakrishna. From his letters and conversations, one can gain some idea of the great storm that was raging in Narain's soul during this period. He clearly saw to what an extent the educated Hindus had come under the spell of the materialistic ideas of the West. He despised sterile imitation, but he was also aware of the great ideas that formed the basis of European civilization. He told his friends that in India, the salvation of the individual was the accepted goal, whereas in the West it was the uplift of the people, without distinction of caste or creed. Whatever was achieved there was shared by the common man. Freedom of spirit manifested itself in the common good and in the advancement of all men by the united efforts of all. He wanted to introduce this healthy factor into the Indian consciousness. Yet he was consumed by his own soul's hunger to remain absorbed in samadhi. He felt at this time a spiritual unrest like that which he had experienced at the Kashipur garden house during the last days of Sri Ramakrishna's earthly existence. The outside world had no attraction for him, but another factor, perhaps unknown to him, was working within him. Perfect from his birth, he did not need spiritual disciplines for his own liberation. Whatever disciplines he practiced were for the purpose of removing the veil that concealed, for the time being, his true divine nature and mission in the world. Even before his birth, the Lord had chosen him as his instrument to help him in the spiritual redemption of humanity. Now, Narain began to be aware that his life was to be quite different from that of a religious recluse. He was to work for the good of the people. Every time he wanted to taste for himself the bliss of samadhi, he would hear the piteous moans of the teeming millions of India victims of poverty and ignorance. Must they, Narain asked himself, forever grovel in the dust and live like brutes? Who would be their savior? He began also to feel the inner agony of the outwardly happy people of the West, whose spiritual vitality was being undermined by the mechanistic and materialistic conception of life, encouraged by the sudden development of the physical sciences. Europe, he saw, was sitting on the crater of a smouldering volcano, and any moment Western culture might be shattered by its fiery eruption. The suffering of man, whether in the East or in the West, hurt his tender soul. The message of Vedanta, which proclaimed the divinity of the soul and the oneness of existence, he began to realize, could alone bind up and heal the wounds of India and the world. But what could he, a lad of 25, do? The task was gigantic. He talked about it with his brother disciples, but received scant encouragement. He was determined to work alone if no other help was forthcoming. Narendra felt cramped in the monastery at Baranagar and lost interest in its petty responsibilities. The whole world now beckoned him to work. Hence, one day in 1890, he left the monastery again with the same old determination never to return. He would go to the Himalayas and bury himself in the depths of his own thought. To a brother disciple he declared, "I shall not return until I gain such realization that my very touch will transform a man." He prayed to the Holy Mother that he might not return before attaining the highest knowledge, and she blessed him in the name of Sri Ramakrishna. Then she asked whether he would not like to take leave of his earthly mother. "Mother," Narain replied, "you are my only mother." Accompanied by Swami Vivekananda, Narain left Kolkata and set out for northern India. The two followed the course of the Ganga, their first halting place being Bhagalpur. To one of the people who came to visit him there, Narain said that whatever of the ancient Aryan knowledge, intellect and genius remained, could be found mostly in those parts of the country that lay near the banks of the Ganga. The farther one departed from the river, the less one saw of that culture. This fact, he believed, explained the greatness of the Ganga as sung in the Hindu scriptures. He further observed, the epithet mild Hindu, instead of being a word of reproach, ought really to point to our glory, as expressing greatness of character. For see how much moral and spiritual advancement and how much development of the qualities of love and compassion have to be acquired before one can get rid of the brutish force of one's nature, which impels a man to slaughter his brother men for self-aggrandizement. He spent a few days in Varanasi and left the city with the prophetic words, "When I return here the next time, I shall burst upon society like a bombshell, and it will follow me like a dog." In our next episode, we embark on a journey through the sacred heights of the Himalayas with Swami Vivekananda. Witness his deep spiritual experiences, the personal trials he faces, and his profound reflections on the state of India. Join us as we uncover how these experiences shape his mission and vision for the future. Thank you for listening till the end. Please subscribe, turn on the notifications, like, comment, and share with your friends. This will help more listeners to discover our channel and content.